Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's keynote webinar that's been created through the work at the Cornell SC Johnson College of Business, Center for Hospitality Research, and brought to you today by eCornell. My name's Jean Varney, and I'm a faculty member at the Nolan School of Hotel Administration in the SC Johnson College of Business here at Cornell. It's my pleasure to bring to you today our webinar that's titled The Evolution of Hotel Sustainability Data, Carbon, Food Waste, and Beyond. Today, we'll be specifically discussing some issues and some areas around food waste, how to leverage the power of sustainability data and metrics, and we'll include some discussion addressing Scope 3 impacts, which is a big issue today, and then the impacts and intersections of climate change and biodiversity. So the webinar today is going to be full of a lot of meaningful data and trends, but most importantly, some really excellent best practices and programs that you and really any hospitality organization can use to improve your environmental performance. So I know you're going to really enjoy our three speakers today, and you're going to be inspired by their transformational work. So I'd like to go ahead and have everyone introduce themselves. And today we'll start with Gizem Kielik, she's the Director of Industry Research and Government Affairs at the American Hotel Lodging Association. So Gizem, would you take a minute and give us a brief introduction of yourself and your work at AHLA?
Yeah, sure. My name is Gizem Kilic. I oversee our industry research related to government affairs and advocacy issues. Additionally, I'm also a PhD candidate at Cornell Hotel School of Hotel Administration. My research mainly focuses on sustainability and food waste policies. So thankfully, my research and my work at AHLA are kind of jointly working together.
That's great. Thank you, Gizem. Next, we have Alex Nicholas Venuzia he is the Program Manager for Food Loss and Waste at the World Wildlife Fund. Alex, could you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do at World Wildlife Fund?
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to be here. I help to lead our work from farm all the way down to working with schools and with policymakers. So that includes helping connect buyers and growers to utilize more of what is grown and to measure how much is being lost on farms. We run a public-private partnership in the US called the US Food Waste Pact. And we've really focused on the retail and the food service sectors, but are looking forward, and we'll talk about today how we're going to be working more with the hospitality sector. We helped oversee a program with K through 12 schools called Food Waste Warriors to really help them understand where their food comes from and how reducing food waste can reduce the impacts of the food system. It's a very hands-on STEM-based, and it's a free curriculum in Spanish and English. And then we take all that work programmatically and connect it to policy advocacy. We're one of the co-leads for the Zero Food Waste Coalition. So great to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. All right. And then last but certainly not least, Eric Ricarte, who's the CEO and founder of Greenview, a global hospitality sustainability consulting firm. And Eric, would you take a few minutes telling us about yourself and your work at Greenview?
Sure. Thank you, Jean. Eric Ricarte, founder of Greenview. Also, most importantly, an '01 undergrad hotel school alum, together with my partner and my wife, Grace Kang, '99 alum and Johnson grad, as well, an MBA. And so we are a group of entities, and we are basically here today to talk about a lot of things relating to hotel sustainability. Now, Greenview was founded on the premise of helping catalyze sustainability through data, metrics, reporting, which today evolved into many more things. I'm based in Singapore, and much of that has been thanks to the collaborative efforts with Cornell and many hotel companies to help lead. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Jean, and look forward to talking about some data today.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much, everyone. And without further delay, Eric, can you actually go ahead and start us off here with an overview of the CHR benchmarking sort of process and maybe a little bit of the overview of how you work with the data, some highlights and findings in our hot off the presses latest 2024 publication?
Happy to do so. Thank you. So as mentioned, this is the 2024 release. This is the 10th anniversary of the CHSP index. And so if it's possible to get the deck up, I'll go through some slides. Now, I think that the topic here is evolution, and there is a big, fast evolution of sustainability. As well, there's an acceleration of sustainability data. And so this will be very fast-paced, but it is tuned to the times right now of a very big evolution and acceleration of data. And so in this 10th year, we're now ready to take it to the next level. So Greenview was started in 2008, and we've now grown to a company today that has 30 people, and we help companies large and small, nearly 70 companies on sustainability strategy, governance, data, reporting, benchmarking, certifications, and other things to really flow down the sustainability mindset across the company. And so with that, one of the things that we have done is started in 2012, originating the conversations, the CHSP index. And so this today has grown to, as you can see, a worldwide phenomenon, and it's been an evolution. This was started and it is conceptualized to give specific benefits to the hotel industry, as you can see here. The idea is that hotel companies can benchmark performance against peers and have a platform to do that. We have a publicly available data set. We have an ability to systemically test for validity, to contribute to needs of carbon calculation and carbon measurements, and have something that's cost effective and scalable. And so that's been really the benefits that was started and incubated at the Cornell Center for Hospitality Research. Now, this has been a partnership among Greenview, the Center for Hospitality Research, an industry advisory group that helps provide the technical support, the external advocacy, input, and helping improve it constantly. And of course, the participants who provide the data and help provide the funding model for this. And so this is now, again, the 10th year of this, and I'd like to present some of the ways we do things in the results. So we essentially collect data in bulk from hotels. It can be individually or can be at a company level, at a property portfolio. We then harmonize the data. We segment, we code, we test to make sure the data are correct. We set minimum thresholds for generating benchmarks, and they output the data. That's essentially what it is. But the most important is that it's specific to the nuances of energy, water, carbon, and waste calculation measurements, which evolves over time, and it's specific to the hotel industry. And this has now grown. As you can see, this is the evolution. We're at a point now where we have over 27,000 hotels worth of data with 42 companies, 1,000 geographies across the world, and it keeps growing. And so we invite those to keep this trend going and participate as well, as this data is becoming more and more important to understand and work with across hotel companies, hotel properties, and even destinations. Now, these are thankfully these participants who have provided the generous support and the data to help fund this and to help provide the robust data set. And so these are the participants for this year. And what we do is we output and benchmark energy, water, carbon, working on waste. That's energy efficiency as well as renewables. And we do this in industry-specific metrics, including HCMI, HWMI, the initiative that is also a little bit older of the constant way to measure the carbon footprint of a hotel room night and meeting space, started by the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance and World Travel and Tourism Council, and now several iterations and managed by the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. We do this benchmarking with intensity based on floor area, occupancy, and room metrics that are used for various purposes. Now, there is a publicly available data set. You can look to the links further on in the slides later, as well as on the website. But you can go and search this data set across over 1,000 different geographies, whether they be city, province, country, or climate zones, across these metrics to understand the range of benchmarks. The properties and hotels who participate get deeper and more rigorous benchmarking, the benchmarks more specifically, more granularly, with more segmentation and more granular outputs. So we encourage those to participate to really understand where you are in performance. So I'll explain some of the trends in the performance in a minute, but this is really the objective, is to really understand what's going on in the data, not only your data, but as well in context with the others. So with that, hotel properties can participate, but companies get portfolio level data reports that they then feed into their own respective systems. We have a full data trends guidance document available at Cornell. And so I'd encourage you to take a look, where we provide all the methodology, all the information, all the tables, a lot of insights, and as well as the latest trends each year. And we have more resources on our website considering how we do the validity testing, how we do the emission factors. We have tutorial videos, a lot more, which has expanded because the guidance document is so big now that we have to add more content elsewhere. And so there's plenty of resources, and we keep adding them as we keep evolving the project. The participation is pretty simple. You can go to the website, fill out a form, pay the corresponding participation fee, or if you're already participating under an existing company, send the data through the system that they're asking you to use, and it's all included. And then you receive your benchmark report, provided the test is valid. Here's our timeline. So for this year's iteration, we're looking for participation open to confirm for another month, and then to be benchmarked and included within the benchmarks by late August. However, you can participate and benchmark anytime. Any time of the year throughout, you can benchmark even historically. It's just to be included in the referential data set. We do the cutoff for those hotel companies that have submitted the first round of data by August 31st for 2023 calendar year data. So a little bit into the trends before we then talk about the next phase. So this is the global data set of 27,000 in some hotels. Here's some key findings. First, this is really still, now we're benchmarking 2022. We're still recovering from COVID. The benchmark yardstick is 2019 that everybody's looking toward. So the question is, where are we in relation to 2019, and where are we in relation to still some of that, COVID outcome? And so what we're seeing is that this is actually the first time that we're seeing an increase in energy, water, and waste, and carbon across the board because of the increases essentially in occupancies and in usage of the hotels in 2022 compared to 2020, especially in several markets. Some markets were still a little bit in recovery at the time, so it's not uniform, but we're seeing a general trend. Now, however, despite the short-term increases, we are seeing general long-term trends. And so many markets are back to stabilized occupancy 2022, even higher. And we are seeing a general trend of efficiency increase on an intensity basis across the way, which will show. The reductions we're seeing are actually highest in the 4-star, 5-star, the luxury segments, as well as in resorts. They're the ones who have made the greatest strides overall, if I look in aggregate. There still is this phenomenon called the efficiency gap, considering the range of performance among similar hotels in a market, which we'll show some example of. And in 2022, renewable energy purchase or installation is still pretty nascent. We're seeing a bigger uptick in Europe, and we see a lot more now in 2023, but we have a sense that the renewable energy percentage will be possibly the biggest and most important metric going forward. Now, in terms of the, sorry about that, I missed a slide there. So in terms of the data then, let's get into it. So across areas, this is just a little bit of an example, but you can kind of see where things play out. Now, there may be a correlation between weather, but some markets tend to be a little higher in energy consumption among hotels. Now, we're showing here the example of full-service hotels that are not resorts and do not wash their laundry in-house to normalize. And so you can see the Middle East tends to perform a little higher in terms of Abu Dhabi, for example, and some markets perform just better than others in aggregate. However, when we look a little further, then we can see that there may be other types of increases and decreases. You can see Europe is actually a little bit more stable and consistent. Then when we look into the issue of carbon, it gets a little bit different. We see there's a little bit of more of asymmetry because now we're looking at the emission factor and the coefficients compared to the relative energy. And so those are not always one-to-one. And you can see places like Toronto, which had higher energy, is much lower in its carbon intensity. So then if we look similarly in water, now we see that some interesting figures we see in water. Some markets systemically have higher water usage. They're not always resort areas as well. For example, we see areas like Beijing and Tokyo have high water usage compared to others, even though it's similar type of market. So with that, a little bit more similarly, you can see that these trends kind of continue, and all the data is available if you want to go and benchmark and see the range within any of these markets. All this data I'm presenting is available online. Now here we get into some more interesting things specifically. So this is Paris. So in Paris, we see a trend we see kind of common, which is that as you go higher in segment, you see a higher intensity. So if you look at on STR chain scale segments, there's a straight curve up. Same with star ratings. And you can kind of see once you get into that luxury 5-star, it goes even higher. However, if you go then into other markets, you can see that sometimes it's even higher. This is Phuket. Now, you can see, for example, that there is a much higher push into the resort versus non-resort, which is kind of common. But it's a little more parallel if we're looking at resort hotels against those stars. So a lot of detail, a lot of rigor, a lot of information, a lot of data mining to be done, a lot of analysis. And we encourage those who are interested to look more and work with the data. And we can see here as well in the US, there's an interesting trend where we see resorts are actually much higher, luxury as well. But it's actually a consistent one that we see even across markets. For example, here, this is the LA metro area, greater Los Angeles, and we can see that there's a little more stability in some markets where you may have some controls or best practices already in place. Now, let's go to some of the more interesting ones. Now, let's get into the overall trends. So we see, first off, what are we year over year and what are we globally? A couple of just general markets. We look at China, US, UK, and we can see this kind of phenomenon where there was still a reduction year over year in some place, but we're seeing the increase in the red. So China was still recovering the market in 2022, but US and UK, the per square meter, per square foot area is up, and the other ones are down. But then 19 to 2022, we're seeing a general drop. If we continue that trend throughout, we're going to see the same thing across the way. Now, this is for the carbon difference. We're seeing a very similar trend in carbon. And water, we're seeing a trend as well from even intensity for occupied room, which is a metric more commonly used. Similarly, look at all markets. We're seeing year over year, 21 to 22, a bigger increase because of the increased occupancies generally, but we see a downward trend across the board in markets, again, among similar segments. And these are like for like, meaning the same data of same hotels in the data set from these two different periods, same in water and the same in carbon. So it's a very interesting phenomenon that is promising that there's a lot of action being taken on an intensity basis. So, and we will basically the same. So it's really good to interesting to see what are the key trends and what are the ones outside of here. Now, this is the interesting thing. So this is all the hotels we have in the data set of France. Every hotel is a bar. And you can kind of see where the range is. Where's the median and where the quartiles. And you can see there's a pretty big difference relatively to each other. And if you go even more extreme, you see a lot. Now, these are the ones that we actually, not counting the ones that we kicked out because they were too high or too low to question their validity. And that's a country among some hotels. But we get this efficiency gap, meaning if you take that range between upper and lower quartile, it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. And we're seeing this consistently among segments all across Europe. We see this even consistently and even higher in certain segments. But this is where you can see some markets, there's a much bigger push because the upper quartile is much higher, meaning there's a tendency to be a large swath of inefficient hotels in the market. So lots of interesting data, lots of stuff we can do with this. We see water is about the same. And then you see some markets just tend to have a little bit more across as well. And this is even in LA. You can kind of see this phenomenon continues to be the same across the way. So the bottom line here is that there are a lot of hotels that have a lot of opportunity to improve their performance. And where there might be a tendency to have some inefficient hotels pulling it up, then there's a larger play within the destination to improve that. Now, that's the sustainability up to now. And this is amazing data. We're able to now churn out numbers, churn out stats, churn out trends due to the 10 years of this. But what is the next frontier? As Gina opened with, we have 3 key things because it doesn't stop here. Sustainability keeps evolving and there's more and more data. Food waste, scope 3 emissions, and biodiversity. So first off, this idea of the carbon emissions had typically been the scope 1 and scope 2, which are the emissions that are specifically from the energy consumption and a few other things like the fugitive emissions. And so that was what typically was benchmarked for energy. But now we're in the net zero context, the idea that there is an emission across the entire value chain of your operations. So here are some of the things that are in place. But the idea that we will measure scope 3 for a hotel and for a company is exactly what's going on right now. There's a big push and a big work to try to understand scope 3 emissions and metrics as they relate to a hotel. Now, what are they in a hotel? We have a full resource of the net zero methodology for hotels that will provide all these detail, but you can kind of see it's all the aspects of the hotel operation, the things you buy, the upstream emissions of the soap, of the food and beverage, the embodied carbon of the building, the way you transport things, the emissions of the waste downstream. All of these things have a carbon footprint. As well, you have issues such as the travel of the people who work in the company, the employee commutes from to and from the hotel. Those are big sources, as well as anything that's downstreamed, franchises, of course, and the like. Now, Why is this important? As mentioned, scope 3 net zero is a big phenomenon. And this is a big phenomenon because this is becoming much more important. Regulation is now mandating scope 3 reporting. Investors are asking it because people want to understand what is the carbon footprint and risk of my business and my product or service overall. So that is the next frontier. And similarly, while we're trying to figure out scope 3 emissions now, and it's kind of difficult, if I look 10 years back when we started the CHP index, we've come a long way. So we will keep going a lot more. But there's another piece of this. Hotels are part of scope 3 of much larger value chain. And if I look at the emissions of a hotel room night or a hotel, there are a number of players who would put that in their scope 3 landscape. And so there is a need now to provide the hotel data as scope 3 of some other footprint, for example, the business or the destination or those working with the industry. And so that's where CHSB is more powerful because the data that we have amassed is already widely used by a large number of governments, of travel bodies, of distribution, and corporate entities that are looking to find that data, and we can give the benchmarks and the ranges. Now, we do this because we take HCMI, the industry methodology from the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, to standardize the way you calculate across the industry. We aggregate that and segment and harmonize it in CHSB, then we output it in a hotel footprinting tool. This is available online, hotelfootprints.org, where you can go and you can get the average benchmark across a hotel. And as well, you can access this. We give a freely available public data set, which has a bulk output feed of the average benchmarks and footprints using HCMI per market similarly. So that enables a lot of support for those looking to do scope 3 calculations. And the hotel industry is actually one of the most further ahead to be able to provide good quality data for scope 3 emissions of something as a supplier to someone else. That's the scramble everybody else is doing. And thanks to this group and this initiative, we now have a big lesson learned on how this is done well. Now, the other one is biodiversity, because we're not just about climate change. It's about what about the ecosystems? What about the species? What about the plants? What about the habitats? What about all the other things that actually are tangible to the planet? So biodiversity is the next frontier. And this is a much more wider set of metrics and things that are looked at. Here's just a sampling of some of the types of metrics that companies are now looking at for biodiversity, which really focuses on the potential impacts of the hotel or the impacts that will affect the hotel. Whereas carbon is kind of just a metric that has all these other impacts. A lot of these are caused by carbon emissions, but the idea that I will start to quantify and measure some of the impacts I'm having or may have a risk from biodiversity is this next frontier, and we're working to do a lot more on that. Now, with that, to wrap up, now we're doing a lot more global agreements, global accords. There's global biodiversity agreements. There's a lot more regulation, a lot more investor requests in this. But to wrap up then in biodiversity comes food waste. Now, food waste is the intersection, because if you look at climate change, carbon emissions, biodiversity impacts, food waste and measurement of food waste is the nexus of this all. We've done a lot of work together with the WWF to put out a methodology for how you measure food waste in the hotel industry. We've started to put out sample benchmarks and harmonize that so that we can give better data, because this is such an important initiative. And so now we're in our trends reporting, we're seeing that there are companies allowed taking steps, big movement to actually do things to reduce food waste and reduce the types of generation of waste. And as well, we're now going to output food waste metrics with CHSB as we've been collecting. But the important piece here is the context that food waste is the nexus of helping mitigate environmental impacts around biodiversity, around climate change, and improving operational efficiency to affect the bottom line, as well as affecting guest preference and impact. And so food waste is suddenly front and center, which is why there's nobody better than the WWF to really focus on why this is an important issue. So it's my pleasure to then pass it off now to Alex to talk about this important issue and the work you've been doing, which is now front and center.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. Really great overview. Very exciting to see what's happening on the sustainability data front in the sector. I'm going to start by, if you could pull the slides back up, just giving you a little bit of background. And kind of Eric, as you pointed out, not many people are aware that reducing food waste is so critical for addressing this triple threat of not just climate change, but nature loss, pollution, not to mention, global hunger. And so I appreciate the opportunity to really speak with you on this today. For those that don't know, the World Wildlife Fund, we're one of the largest NGOs globally. We have a presence in over 100 countries. And we're really focused on working with a wide swath of organizations, companies, governments, and communities to address the most pressing threats to the diversity of life on Earth and to really develop solutions that meet the needs of both people and nature. And so I think as many of you sit here and you're listening, you might still be wondering, well, why is WWF here to talk about food waste when, we're so well known for our work on conservation and protecting endangered species? So the real answer is that if we start kind of back at the source of where our food comes from, agriculture occupies 40% of the Earth's non-frozen landmass, and it's the largest driver of deforestation at about 80%, soil erosion, chemical and water use. And you can imagine what that does to our ecosystems, into our natural life. Today, 70% of biodiversity loss is a result of farming and food production. And if you think about the big picture here, degrading nature contributes to climate change. Agriculture, for instance, contributes to 30% roughly of all of our carbon emissions. And it degrades our ability and our resilience in the face of more extreme weather events, droughts, floods, wildfires. I mean, these are not just our carbon sinks, but our water sinks, right? When you have storms, and it contributes to the emergence of global pandemics such as COVID-19. So let's talk about what we can do about it, right? That's a little bit of the background, but when you think about food waste, to really boil it down, it's a giant inefficiency in our food system. And when we throw away, nearly half of what we grow, both in this country and globally, this has huge implications for humanity and the environment. It means we're not just throwing away the food, but all of the resources that went into it, right? The land, the water, the energy, the labor. And so, that might seem like a far off problem for those of you who are sitting in a more urban area and aren't a part of an agriculture community like where I grew up. But just think about it this way. Again, it's an inefficiency, even for you and for me. I mean, the average household is $2,000 a year, more or less, on food that you then just throw away, right? And then from a climate perspective, we've hinted at this, but this is 6% of all of our GHG emissions. And we hear a lot about, for instance, the rising emissions in the aviation sector. Eric just talked about how that's part of kind of the scope 3 emissions, right? That, hotels are thinking about. That's double what the US airline industry has in terms of its carbon footprint. And so this all is happening at a time, and we think about throwing all this of food when people are struggling. A lot of people are struggling with the cost of food inflation. And again, it's using all the resources unnecessarily in the process to do that. The other issue is that we don't do a good job of taking what food represents, which are nutrients, and making sure that at the very least, we're putting it back into growing more food or getting it to people who don't know where the next meal is coming from, right? 1 in 10 Americans are food insecure. And if we want to move to a more circular food system, we have to develop the alternative infrastructure and operationalize ways to use these nutrients and the surplus food that can't be fed to people either, to feed animals, right? To be turned into compost to grow more food. And the truth is that less than 10% of all food waste today is donated, and only 5% is composted. So we have a long way to go, but that's where we're headed, and why it's a time when we're really trying to galvanize action. Because again, what is food waste? It's a giant inefficiency. And so it's not controversial to get behind this. Everyone knows this from growing up, right? Don't waste your food, but it also has some real benefits, which I'm going to go over here in the next couple slides. So the other way that I like to frame the problem is that, where food ends up is also an environmental justice problem, right? This is the number one thing. We talk a lot about plastics, and we should, but the number one thing that we throw into our landfills is food, right? And so where those landfills and those incinerators are sited is disproportionately in low-income communities. And so this is an environmental justice issue. It's not just about getting food to the surplus food to people, but it's about keeping it out of the places that's going to continue to harm, communities who are already struggling. And we also talk about keeping out of landfills, right? Landfills are a huge source of methane. They're the 3rd largest source of methane. So we want to obviously keep food out of it. It's I think it drops about 70%, the latest EPA report, of that methane, food in landfills. But just preventing that to begin with is where the biggest gains can be made. That's why I started with the slides on agriculture, right? You can see 90% plus of the emissions of food have already happened by the time it hits your plate. And so the opportunity isn't just, we have to start somewhere, right? We've got to stop and kind of move to that more circular model, keeping it out of landfills for all the reasons I discussed. but where we're headed is we need to stop it from that excess production of taking place in the first place. Because if you look at that and you put it on a map, look over on the right, this is how big an area larger than the Indian subcontinent that was used just to grow food that was lost on farms. So I'm not talking about food that was lost further down the supply chain or in your homes, just that was lost on farms. That's how big of an area on the map we're using to grow food that then no one ate. So you can start to see again why WWF cares about this issue and why we're talking about food waste. Here's some good news, right? This is starting to normalize. This is something that is sort of inevitable in the sense that everyone is going to need to start to confronting this issue. There's new legislation, CSRD in the EU, which will affect a lot of hospitality companies, which food waste is a part of. It's going to require larger food waste generators to report on their food waste. And so that, again, what happens when we start to measure, we start to obviously manage the issue. It's going to be a positive thing because once it's in front of you and you can get your hands around it, companies want to do, anyone who works in hotels or in any food business, no one's happy about the food waste, right? This isn't something people are doing willfully. It's just become something that we've sort of accepted in the cost of doing business. And that's what we're really looking to change by getting this institutionalized and normalized to start measuring and managing the issue. The other is that you're seeing supply chains lean into this. It's not just about your own food waste, but you've got groups like 10 by 20 by 30, some of the associations, AHLA included, who are really pushing for this sort of collaboration across their supply chains to start to reduce food loss and waste. And I'm going to get into some examples of that. And then obviously individual companies as well, like Walmart, which is a member of some of our public-private work. So when we go back to what I said to you before, really, I want this to stay with you. Food waste is an inefficiency. And so when you address it, you're getting a very solid return on that investment. It's about 8-to-1 in the US. It's a little bit higher globally. And so you can see some of the statistics, and this gets back to what I said. When you throw away food, you throw away all the resources that went into producing it. So water, all the emissions and energy. And when you don't throw it into a landfill and you are able to think about these more circular channels, we get more food to people in need. And when we develop that alternative infrastructure, right, for composting, anaerobic digestion, more food rescue facilities, right, we're creating new jobs along the way. Not to mention the upcycling and all the new products that can be used by taking surplus food that's perfectly good for people and transforming it into new products. So what are we doing here in the US? This is something that I think really sets the stage for what we can do as the hospitality sector. We've been working now for 5+ years on the West Coast through an effort called the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment. And that was really started by Oregon, Washington, California coming together and saying, to really address climate change, what are the key issues that we need to work on together? And so they helped, give them all the credit. They were the ones that started this. Food waste was one of the issues that they identified. And they brought in WWF, they brought in RAP, they brought in ReFed, and a whole host of other amazing groups that supported it along the way and said, we want to work pre-competitively, right? Food waste is not an issue we should be competing on. This is something where we can share what's working in terms of reducing waste or what challenges are. And so, you saw us first start in the retail and then the food service sector. So groups like Walmart, Albertsons, Kroger were some of the first to sign on. And then in the food service sector, Aramark, Compass Group, and Sodexo. And they've been reporting year over year, right? And each year getting into the weeds around what departments, have highest level waste, right? What are the destinations in terms of, is it going to landfill? Is it being donated? Is it being composted? So reporting that year over year. And again, like I said to you before, when you measure it, what happens, right? You start to get your arms around it and you can start to manage that out. And our latest report showed that, 5 years on, since 2019, more or less, we've been able to decrease for the retail sector food waste 25%, which is it's been a long road, and we've done a lot of work where, again, you put these different companies who are normally competitors together and build that comfort and be able to share those best practices. We've run pilot projects together, which I'm going to touch on in a minute, where the findings are then shared across the whole industry. So we've been able to contribute to that, but I think the motion of measuring this and then operationalizing food waste as an issue has really been the key. It's not just something that's a small sustainability niche issue. It's really been built into a lot of these organizations' operations. And it's not just the food waste that then gets decreased, that 25%, it's then now 30% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, the reduction in water use, the lost sales, because again, it's an inefficiency. And then, not only that, but they've been able to get more food. They've been able to donate more of their surplus to people, but I will say that this is a little bit counterintuitive. They've reduced the amount of food that they're donating. That's not a bad thing at the end of the day. We don't want to necessarily, if you're a business, go out and source a bunch of food, not be able to sell it, and then have to donate it. For what you have left, yes, first and foremost, donate it. We want to keep it and feed people. But overall, you are trying to address this inefficiency which is called shrink in the retail sector. So building off the success of this, you can read about the reports. I put them here on the screen. We've now launched a national effort. That was just on the West Coast. We've now launched the U.S. Food Waste Pact, and we're really excited to build off the success that we've had with retail and with the food service sectors. And we want to try to move into helping the hospitality sector do the same, working with folks like AHLA, Greenview, and all the brands that at WWF we've been partnering with for years. And so I wanted to just give you a flavor of kind of how we're starting. And then from there, I'm going to pass it to Gizem to go into more of the work that AHLA has been doing to really engage its members. We've put together a report where we went into different venues in the hospitality sector to talk about how messaging to consumers in the same way that they do it, right, with reducing your energy use during your stay, but how can you tactfully encourage customers to take only what they need, right? And what were the impacts of that? That's one of the studies we've done so far. We also, at the circularity event that GreenBiz puts on 2 years ago, help them to really identify ways that they can make it a lower waste event. So there's a second case study you'll see on the screen. So those are some small steps, but the key for this is really figuring out measurement. How can we start to get enough detail to show, like we have in the retail and the food service sector, where is food going in terms of destinations, right? And start to break it down by different areas of an operation, since there's so many kitchens and so many different styles of operations, like Eric went over in his data. And so I want to just leave you with a couple more pieces of, again, we don't just want to measure for measurement's sake. We want to use that data to drive action and to set up pre-competitive, pilot projects that then benefit the wider group. So here's a few that we've done as of late that I think can just kind of get the wheels turning for all of you for the hospitality sector. We used AI across 2 different retailers to try to improve order accuracy, where you take out kind of the human factor and maybe over ordering food. And you can see that they were able to decrease food waste by 14% per store in total emissions pretty significantly. We were able to take and identify hotspots in another retailer where there was surplus food that was going to waste, and then use it and turn it back in some of their food service operations, right? This was about rotisserie chickens and berries, and you can see the potential cost savings that came as a result of that. And one of my favorite and very low tech versus the first two strategies that we've run, and we're now looking to do this in food services, helping to really engage and lean on your own employees to come up with these solutions. They know where the food waste is occurring. And even in an environment like food manufacturing with Bob's Red Mill, just training them on food waste and then giving them incentives to go and provide ideas. We had, look at how many ideas, 175 employee ideas, and just doing one that was low cost, and easy to implement, reduced in one line of their production a 70% decrease. And so those are just a few samples. We've got a lot of really exciting work that we're doing across the, particular supply chains for like potatoes and strawberries, more employee engagement projects like the Bob's Red Mill one with Del Monte, Land O'Lakes. And we're really looking forward to trying to take that model and work into the hospitality sector to achieve those gains that you saw we've been able to do in retail. So thank you again for your time. And Gizem, I'm going to pass it over for you to talk more about the work you're doing at AHLA.
Thank you, Alex. This was great. Hi, everyone. Again, this is Gizem. I'm so excited to see all this data coming up. When I started my master's at Cornell in 2016, now I'm just wrapping up my dissertation. One of the biggest challenges I had in the literature was actually the lack of food waste data. And thankfully, in the future, that I think we will see much better and much higher quality data that will help the academia a lot. So I'm really excited to see these initiatives. Let me talk you a little bit about what we do at AHLA and how we collaborate with other associations and organizations. So for those that you don't know AHLA is American Hotel and Lodging Association. So we have over 30,000 members, which are among the top hotel companies in the nation. and we represent over 3 million hotel rooms. We basically collaborate with our members to tackle the policy issues and advocacy issues to just increase the quality and the better standards of the hospitality industry. We have a couple of platforms and programs on the sustainability, one of them being the Responsible Stay. It's basically the platform within the hospitality industry that we aim to raise awareness and educate our members over the issues. And we offer resources and actually conduct a lot of research with WWF and Greenville, including among one of them. And then we try to share the stories and how our actually members and hotels are working together to reduce the carbon emissions. So we focus majorly on 3 areas. First one is we identify the policies that are included in the issue. So we do identify them, we develop them, and then we model these policies. I particularly do research on the majority of these impact policies. And then we make sure that we represent the hotel voice and we align with their strategic objectives, engage with the other local organizations over the issue. We make sure that we emphasize the education and awareness of the impact on the sustainable practices. The second step is the strategic partnerships and collaborations. We make sure that we prioritize research and member resource amplification to enhance the member value. And another thing is that we make sure that we strengthen existing partnership or develop new ones as needed to make sure that we focus on the responsible and state initiatives and sustainability. And the third one is the messaging and communication. It's actually, I think, one of the most important topics because yes, you do something, but how do you message it? How do you frame the message is the most important thing. I think we come into there as pretty much one of the most impactful things that we do. We make sure that we empower our members and show the work that they are doing in a really great storytelling. And we collaborate with also the other media associations to make sure that our voice is heard. There are 4 major topics and committees under this responsible stay. So waste reduction, we work with WWF on the waste reduction, including food waste. And then we currently collaborated with Procure Impact for the responsible sourcing. We also have a committee that also brings together the members. We have an energy efficiency and water conservation. So all of these 4 pillars have their each committee, and actually each committee meets every month to talk about what they can do, what kind of deliverables they can do, what kind of research they can do, what are the policies and important issues that they want to work on. And because we meet monthly, it's very useful to keep things, keep in track and actually create a good impact. Because one of the challenges that I've seen in my research as well was how the all parties were not coming together to talk about these issues. And when all parties don't come into, they are not heard and they don't know what the other party is doing. So it's really great to have this committee. We bring in the members, we bring in the collaborators, vendors as if needed, associations, so all of them can actually talk together. So recently we jointly started operating Green Key Global. So it's basically a very well-known and credible environmental certification designed for the hospitality industry. It focuses on the hotel operations and covers 17 of the SDG goals by the United Nations. And Hotel Association of Canada established in 1994, but it wasn't in the United States until AHLA stepped in and jointly started operating the certification. For those who are interested, make sure to just send us an email. Just go to greenkeyglobal.org, and then our membership team is happy to help you with that. So with Greenview, as Eric mentioned, we had a report in 2022 called Green Lodging Trends US Market Report. Eric and his team are actually doing the round too. And in 2025, we will be released a new report. And actually, it's really exciting to see that we will be actually able to compare the results. We had the first round, now we will have this round 2, and we will be able to see what are the improvements in sustainability, what are the different metrics, because we know that a lot of hotels in the last 3 years actually did a lot of things. They invested a lot in improving their sustainability efforts. So it's really great to see that in data, actually. please stay tuned for 2025 report. And as I mentioned, we combine forces as Procure Impact, and we try to educate our members around fair trades and responsible sourcing, which we think is a really important issue, especially in the Scope 3 impact of the sustainability. And also, as Alex mentioned, as my other webinar partners mentioned, all of these I can just quickly skip. So we work with WWF on the food waste committee and food waste reduction. Hotel Kitchen is actually one of the platforms that we work together. It's a training toolkit that at a property level, not just for the owners, but for everyone in the operations at operational level. And then they can take a quiz, they can find a proper operational adjustment for their kitchen to reduce the food waste. We are going to be refreshing this and actually expand the program and platform over the course of 2024. We are currently having really monthly talks about how we can actually find a standard data that we can use actually to calculate not just the food waste, but also the financial aspect of how we can help the hoteliers reduce the food waste and also bring some more ROI that comes with the food waste reduction. Because as Alex mentioned, it's very inefficient to have waste overall. And lastly, all of these initiatives and practices actually bring tax benefit, but a lot of hoteliers don't know about it. So we partner with Incentify for the properties to find eligible incentives and savings and apply for this. This platform helps you find the right ones and apply for the right ones for your property. And not only you get rid of the inefficiency, but on the side, you also get financial benefits throughout the sustainable practices. So with this, I pass it on back to Jane. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, everyone. That's incredible information. A lot to take in. We have some great resources that will be posted in the show notes for the replay. I'll mention that again, but we have some questions from the audience. If we could take a few minutes here to go through a few of them. I'll throw the first one out to you, Eric, here. And it's about the data and actually asking about sort of the KPI denominator here. What is the argument for calculating all per occupied room and not per guest night? Seems unfair to hotels with larger rooms for families to be comparing them to hotels with the smaller rooms that might be, again, 1 or 2 people.
Well, I think the argument is it's tough to get the hotel guest count data. That's number one argument. If we had 27,000 hotels worth of guest count that we could put in, then we'd put it. The second is what we actually have we have metrics per occupied room plus per square meter. When it comes to energy and it comes to carbon, in terms of measuring the specific footprint of the building, floor area metrics and intensity seem to be the most common across buildings. And if somebody has a study that empirically proves with a lot of data that the number of guests in a room increases overall across a bunch of hotels the amount of energy significantly to outweigh others, then that would be a very good supporting mechanism to help get more of that data. However, that's not really been proven. As we've seen, sometimes the weather will be a bigger factor. And so in terms of fairness, though, this is actually the issue. Is it fair to compare a hotel versus another? I mean, is it fair to compare an extended stay hotel versus an economy hotel when you're doing a booking? I mean, again, you're making choices based on the type of hotel and what it has. And so the idea is you're able to benchmark hotels of like size. And so we actually have a segment of extended stay where you have a bigger room configuration. And we keep expanding that to be able to add the benchmarks. So you can go check that out. But again, we would love to do so much more benchmarking. That always depends on having the right data points and enough in a critical mass in a market for the segment. So hopefully, as the data evolves, we will be able to get better guest night data because we know that's definitely a bigger one for water usage and improve it over time.
Great, thank you. All right, so I have another question here. And it's actually sort of a specific one. It's referring to cooking oils. Are any hotels, sort of like airlines, using repurposed cooking oil for other energy uses? Anyone have any information on recycling cooking oils and using it for alternative energy uses?
I'm going to say the short answer is yes.
Okay, great.
I don't know any offhand, but actually that's Eddie. There's a lot of hotels doing this. How many, where are they at, that kind of thing. We don't have the data on it yet. Now, this is important because it is these types of practices to build a benchmark. Is this common? Is it happening? Is it prevalent? Who's doing it? And that's the kind of data that we try to mine with the Green Lodging Trends Report, which you can see for the US, for example, responsible stay. We have a series of 75 metrics to benchmark and see what percent of hotels are doing it. Because the question is not, is a hotel doing this or not? Is this a common trend? Is it something that's not too prevalent? And then where may it be common in certain markets or certain segments? And so that's something that we actually have a lot of data on food waste practices, which was in partnership with WWF and HLA. And so encourage you to benchmark your hotels. We have a link we can provide to that for free right now. And then you can see where it's at. And then we can see the trends as it gives amended, and we can see how this has improved over time. So the answer is yes. We unfortunately don't have that as a globally tracked practice yet. But again, this is the kind of thing that as we see more highlights of what types of things are being done about waste and food waste, we'll get more anecdotal stories.
Yeah, I agree with you too. And I'm thinking like the first thing when I saw this that came to mind was hotels that have van transportation using biofuel vans, that kind of thing. We've seen some of that in play, so definitely great. All right, so
and one thing, sorry, I do know there was a guy who was the DOE of a hotel in Toronto who was doing this in his own kitchen, in his own house. He told me about that. So again, we know what's going on in certain places, but can we, bring that as a better practice where it works and things would be great.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Very good. All right, so I have one, Gizem for AHLA. Curious to hear from AHLA if hotel owners will take all of this into consideration when negotiating pricing for and use of food at meetings and conventions. So I think it might be sort of referring to requiring greater F&B minimums versus, the potential of greater food waste.
Mm-hmm. That's a interesting question. Okay, so we work with the owners are very aware of the issues. That's why we have these committees. So we make sure that all parties like collaborate together so that everyone's voice is heard. So I kind of cannot talk about the price per portion of this, but what I can say that what AHLA does is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So I think they are aware of these issues and that we make sure that we send out all our reports, what's going on. We also have food vendors as our partners in our portfolio. So we also, in our meetings and conventions, they also come together. And so owners are very aware of the issues that is going on in the industry and the sustainability practices that come with them. If that answers the question.
Thank you. All right, and the next one I'll put out to the whole group as well, but it is focused on water, and it refers to the situation that's happening in actually Mexico City. What will happen to Mexico City with the aquifer depletion issues there, as predicted, or will what will happen in Mexico City as predicted with the issues there, or will there be any stopgaps? What is the hospitality industry doing to curtail water use? And I know this comes in a wide variety of areas that the industry is trying to sort of address the issue of lowering consumption. Anyone want to chime in?
I can just say, I'm not going to be speaking to specifically what the hospitality sector is doing on this issue, but one of the things that WWF has worked on is science. You've all probably heard of science-based targets initiative around, setting science-based emission targets. Well, there's also now a corollary, which is called science-based targets for nature, and really setting targets around water, biodiversity impacts that are within the bounds of that system that you're sourcing from. And so I think that you'll start to see more companies, leaders, whether that's in the hospitality sector or other, larger food companies that especially on the production side are using quite a bit of water, looking to try to set those targets that are, again, are kind of within the bounds of what nature can support over time. Those planetary boundaries, as they're often called. So I think that's one thing to watch, and I can put the link in the chat, but I'll defer to the rest of the group on maybe any actions on water savings that the hospitality sector is doing.
I can drop in. So we actually are trying to find ways to collaborate with the Water Council. So I think in the upcoming year or so, we will have more connections and maybe a program in liaison with them. So we'll see.
I know too that the Hotel Water Measurement Initiative helps at least hotels understand their consumption, so they have baseline measurement. And for the Global Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, and there's also a tremendous amount of resources on their website too for initiative things like devices, aerators, sensors, timers. There are control devices that we put on all of our water sources, whether it's, faucets, shower heads, the low flow, kitchen steamers. There's just really, if there's anything that uses water, if you Google low flow, chances are there's a manufacturer out there that makes a device that can help us lower those consumption areas. Anything else there? Okay. All right. So we have another one here. Thank you. Next question here. Is there a sustainability best practices checklist for hotels that we can use? We would like to conduct annual property assessments and need a comprehensive and robust checklist. What kinds of resources might you have? There may not be one stop, but there might be some location or some resources that we could use to help compile this.
I can answer that. So actually, that's why we have Green Key Global, because the certification program first does a very comprehensive audit. It creates checklist based on the operational aspects of that is a lot of times different in each property, and then provides you solutions how to actually get the certification. There are different levels of certification. So I think it has a very, very detailed checklist, I can say. I would definitely recommend, if they're interested, to reach out to the Green Key Global to collaborate with them.
Great. Here. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? I can tell you also the Global Sustainable Hospitality Alliance has resources on their website as well. They have there's a specific resource that actually talks about sustainability in pretty much every area of the hotel. The name of the resource is escaping me at this moment, but if you go to their website, it's pretty comprehensive, some of the documentation that they have, and they have a whole section for resources as well.
I would just say in food waste in particular, but Gizem had showed earlier, which is hotel kitchen. So if you're looking to tackle that issue, it breaks it down by the team that you're on within the hotel, and the steps that you can take that will really put the wheels in motion on addressing food waste.
Right.
And to jump in there, I think yes, certificate like Green Key, for example, hotel kitchen, good resource. You have other many tools, many certifications, many checklists actually out there. We, of course, have ours in our Greenview portal software for hotels who want best practice tutorials and various things. But the one thing I would recommend, though, is that it's easy to get that checklist, but then comes, how do I actually do it? And so I would look for a system that, or a resource that really helps do that. So, of course, our system will help. But I think the most important one is to talk among other hotels in your community, because other hotels are in the same bucket. They're in the same boat. There's a hotel association. There's a group council or something, and everybody's trying to do that. And it's sharing best practices, lesson learned. That's what we want to see more of across the hotel industry, is really collaborating on it at a destination level. And that's what I would suggest is number one, to go ask the same question: where's the checklist? What are the solutions? And get the best practice sharing going.
Great. Thank you. All right. So we have one last question here we're going to squeeze in. And it's how have hotels been identifying particulars to improve energy efficiency, and how are there any government incentives for retrofitting to achieve more energy efficiency? So how have they been how do hotels identify areas for efficiency? And I can chime in on this as well, but go ahead, Gizem.
Okay, I was going to say, so, in our portfolio, we have different size of hotels. So sometimes small or medium-sized owners or hotels are not aware, actually. That's where we come in. We identify these on a state, local, and federal level, and then we educate our members. That's why we are there. And then some hotels already have policy teams and government affairs teams, and they are very aware, especially the top companies. They especially have these teams that work on these issues. And so they are very aware, the big companies are very aware of these incentives and practices. And we basically just separate these into 4 pillars that I mentioned and built these committees for exactly this reason, so that we want to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, so everyone knows how they can collaborate or how they can prepare for a more sustainable future, for the 2030 goals. So I think the first comes in if they know about it, if they're aware, and then comes in the preparation phase for that.
Right. So 2 quick things to add on to that. One, if you have a piece of equipment you're replacing, talk to manufacturers and ask the specific questions about what are the most energy efficient models that are available today. So talk to your manufacturers. The second thing is, in the United States, there is a website called desireusa.org, DSIREUSA.org, that lists all the incentives available by state, or at least it tries to capture most of them. All right, I think that's it. We're at time. Thank you so much to our panelists today, our presenters. It was just chock full of amazing information. So again, Eric, Alex, Gizem, thank you so much for everything. Thank you, everyone, for tapping in and giving us a most valuable hour of your time today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having me.
Jean. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
day.
Bye.